Some evening this week, someone is going to ask you for something. A favor, a yes, a small piece of your time that you do not actually have to give. And before you have even decided, you will hear your own voice answer, "Of course, it is no problem. Happy to help." You will smile. You will mean the smile. And underneath it, so quiet that you have trained yourself not to hear it, a smaller voice will be saying something else. Please, not again. Please, not this time. If that half second is familiar to you, the gap between what your mouth says and what your body wanted to say, then stay with me. Because what you are about to learn is not that you are weak. It is almost the opposite. You have probably been called a few things over the years. Too nice, too soft. Someone who simply cannot say no. Maybe you have called yourself those things late at night, after agreeing to one more thing you did not want, asking yourself, what is wrong with you that you keep doing this? So here is the first thing the science wants you to understand. Nothing is wrong with you. The part of you that pleases, that smooths things over, that apologizes before anything has even happened, that part is not a defect in your character. It is one of the oldest survival responses a human being has. It has a name, and once you know that name, you may never see your own kindness in the same way again. Start with your body. The childhood comes later. In 1915, a physiologist at Harvard named Walter Cannon described a reaction he called fight or flight. He had noticed that when an animal is threatened, its body changes in an instant. The heart speeds up, the breath quickens, blood rushes to the muscles. Everything in the creature is suddenly organized around two choices: stay and fight the danger, or run from it. For a long time, this was the entire map of how living things answer fear: fight or flight. Later, researchers added a third response: freeze. Sometimes a creature can neither win the fight nor escape, so its body does something stranger. It goes still. It plays dead. The rabbit frozen flat in the open field, the deer that cannot move in the light, the person who goes silent and numb in the middle of something terrible. Fight, flight, freeze. 3 doors out of danger. But maybe you have already noticed that none of those 3 doors sound like you. When things became tense in your home, you did not fight. You did not run. You did not go blank and still. You did something else entirely. You got helpful. You became charming. You watched the faces of the adults around you, and you adjusted yourself, second by second, to keep them calm. You learned to feel the mood of a room before you had even finished walking into it. You made yourself easy. You made yourself good. That is not fight. That is not flight. That is not freeze. So what is it? In 2013, a therapist named Pete Walker gave it the name that had been missing for 100 years. He called it the fawn response, the 4th F. He had spent decades working with people who survived long, ongoing stress in childhood, and he kept meeting the same pattern. These were people who, when they sensed danger, did not get angry and did not run away. They appeased, they pleased, they managed the emotions of whoever frightened them. They survived not by escaping the threat, but by becoming useful to it. Think about how intelligent that actually is. If you are small, and the danger is large, and the danger is also the person who feeds you and tucks you into bed, then fighting is hopeless. Running is impossible. Where would you even go? And freezing does not make the danger leave the house. So a child finds the one move that works. You make the giant happy. You learn exactly what it wants, and you give it that before it even has to ask. You turn yourself into the most pleasant, least demanding, most helpful version of a person you can build. because a happy giant is a safe giant. That is the fawn response. And if it is the door you learned to use, you did not reach for it because you were weak. You reached for it because, in the situation you were actually in, it was the most intelligent thing a small person could possibly do. Now, why does the body reach for this so fast, without ever asking your permission? For that, you need the work of a neuroscientist named Stephen Porges. Beginning in the 1990s, Porges proposed an idea he called polyvagal theory. The full theory is complex, but one piece of it will quietly rearrange how you understand yourself. Porges argued that your nervous system is constantly scanning the world for signals of safety and signals of danger, completely beneath your awareness. He gave this scanning its own name: neuroception. Not perception, which you do consciously. Neuroception, which your body does on its own, every second, faster than thought. This is the heart of it. Your body decides whether you are safe long before your mind gets any say in the matter. And if your body learned early and often that the way to become safe was to please, then it stores that lesson as a reflex, so that years later, when a person across from you goes quiet, or sharpens their tone, or simply seems a little displeased, your nervous system does not stop to weigh the evidence. It reaches for the old tool. Smile, soften, agree, apologize, fix their mood, make the giant happy. You are not choosing to do this. Your body is doing it for you, the way it always has, to keep you alive. But there is a question hiding underneath all of this. Why is the human animal so exquisitely sensitive to whether other people are pleased with us in the first place? A zebra does not lie awake worrying that the herd is disappointed in it. Why do we? For that answer, you have to look back much further than your own childhood. You have to look at the whole history of our species. For almost the entire time that human beings have existed, we lived in small groups, bands of a few dozen people moving together, hunting and gathering together, raising children together. And in that world, for hundreds of thousands of years, one fact governed everything. You could not survive alone. A single human, cast out of the group, exposed to the cold and the predators and the hunger with no one to share the load, did not last long. To be included was to live. To be excluded was very often to die. So evolution did something ruthless and brilliant. It wired the thread of social rejection directly into the alarm system of the body. The psychologists Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary called this the need to belong, and they argued it is not a preference or a luxury. It is a fundamental human drive, as deep as hunger, because for most of our history, belonging was as necessary as food. And the wiring goes deeper than feelings. In 2003, a neuroscientist named Naomi Eisenberger ran an experiment that has haunted the field ever since. She placed people in a brain scanner and had them play a simple online game of catch with two other players, who then, partway through, began to exclude them, throwing the ball only to each other. A small, almost trivial social rejection. And yet, when Eisenberger looked at the scans, she saw that the same regions of the brain that light up during physical pain were lighting up during that social exclusion. The brain, it turned out, processes being left out, using much of the same machinery it uses to process a broken bone. Sit with that for a moment. To your nervous system, being unwanted is not just unpleasant. It registers as a kind of injury, as danger, as a thing that somewhere far back in the long memory of the species used to be able to kill you. So when you bend yourself into knots to keep someone from being upset with you, you are not being pathetic. You are running a program that kept your ancestors alive for 100,000 years. The desperate human need to stay in the good graces of the group is not a flaw in you. It is one of the oldest and most successful survival strategies that life has ever produced. But a species-wide instinct still has to be installed in one particular child. So now, finally, go back to where it was written in you. A baby is born completely helpless. It cannot feed itself, warm itself, or protect itself. It has exactly one tool for staying alive, and that tool is the adults around it. The psychiatrist John Bowlby, who built the modern science of attachment, showed that a child is driven from birth to keep their caregiver close, because closeness is survival. Just how deep that need runs was shown, painfully, in the 1950s, by a researcher named Harlow. He gave infant monkeys a choice between two artificial mothers. One was built of cold wire, but it gave milk. The other gave no food at all, but it was wrapped in soft cloth. Everyone expected the babies to bond with the mother that fed them. They did not. The infants clung to the soft cloth mother almost around the clock and crossed to the wire mother only to feed and then hurried back. The lesson was impossible to forget. A young creature does not only need to be fed, it needs comfort, closeness, the warmth of a safe body to hold on to, and it will organize its entire small life around getting it. Working alongside Bowlby, Mary Ainsworth then watched in careful detail how differently children learn to keep that closeness depending on the caregiver they are given. A child with a warm and steady parent learns a simple lesson. When the child is upset, someone comes. The child is allowed to have needs and is still loved anyway. But a child whose parent is frightening or unpredictable or fragile or easily angered faces a much harder problem. That child still needs the parent. The need does not go away just because the parent is also a source of fear. So the child has to solve an impossible equation. How do you stay close to the very person you are most afraid of? And the child solves it the only way a child can, by managing the parent, by becoming so attuned, so helpful, so good, so quiet about their own needs, that the dangerous parent stays calm and stays close. In 1933, a Hungarian analyst named Sándor Ferenczi stood in front of his colleagues and read a paper about exactly this. Its title was Confusion of Tongues Between Adults and the Child. In it, he described something the field had mostly looked away from. He described what happens inside a child who is frightened or hurt by the very adult they depend on. And he noticed something that, once you hear it, is almost unbearable in its precision. The child, Ferenczi said, does not turn against the adult who frightens them. The child does the opposite. The child absorbs that adult. The child takes the adult's anger, the adult's expectations, the adult's moods, and swallows them whole and makes them their own. The frightened child becomes a tiny expert in the inner life of the person they fear. A few years later, in 1936, Anna Freud took this idea and gave it the name it still carries today. She called it identification with the aggressor. A child cannot fight a parent and win. A child cannot pack a bag and leave. So the child becomes a devoted student of that parent, anticipating every shift in their mood, becoming whatever keeps them calm. The child quietly gives up their own inner world in order to live safely inside someone else's. Now sit with what that means for you. If you are a person who pleases, who cannot bear the thought of someone being upset with you, who feels other people's moods as though they were the weather inside your own body, then you were almost certainly, once, a very good student. You studied someone. You learned them by heart. You became fluent in a language no child should ever have to learn. The language of keeping a larger person comfortable so that you would be safe. And here is the line that matters most of all, the one to carry out of this and keep. The child you were was not weak. The child you were was brilliant. What looks today like a missing backbone was, back then, a strategy that kept you tied to the people you could not afford to lose. You learned to abandon yourself so that they would not abandon you. That was not cowardice. That was love, sent in the only direction it was safe to send. You were not failing to protect yourself. You were protecting yourself in the only way a child ever can. But a strategy that saves a child can quietly cost an adult almost everything. Because here is the cruel part. The danger ends and the program does not. You grow up, you move out. The large, frightening figures of your early life grow old or distant or gone. The threat is over. And yet the response keeps running because your nervous system never received the message that the war had finally ended. So now you are an adult, sitting in a meeting, and your manager uses one flat, unreadable tone, and your stomach drops as if you were 8 years old again. Now you are with a partner who is kind, someone who would never harm you, and they simply go quiet for an evening, and you feel a panic you cannot explain, and you start doing all the old things. You become extra helpful. You ask if they are okay 3 times. You apologize for things that were never yours to apologize for. You search their face for the weather. You feel most afraid not when someone attacks you, but when someone is simply, quietly displeased. A raised voice you can almost manage. It is the cold silence that undoes you, because the cold silence is the one your body learned to fear first. The psychiatrist Bessel Kolk gave a phrase to this kind of memory. He called it the body keeping the score. Long after you have consciously forgotten or forgiven or moved on, the body holds the record. It keeps responding to today as if it were the past. The fawn response is the body keeping a score you did not even know was still being counted. And it adds up. The physician Gabor Mate has spent his career describing what happens to people who spend a lifetime swallowing their own needs in order to manage everyone else's. The chronic exhaustion, the resentment that has nowhere to go, so it turns inward and becomes something heavier. The strange, hollow feeling of being deeply present for every single person in your life and somehow entirely absent from your own. When you are always reading the room, you are never simply resting inside it. Maybe you know that feeling. The dinner where you ate what everyone else was having, just so the waiter would not have to come back. The plan you agreed to and then quietly dreaded for a week. The opinion you softened. The no you turned into a maybe, and the maybe you turned into a yes. The version of yourself you assemble in the hallway before you walk into a room so that no one will ever have a reason to be upset with you. And then the tiredness afterward, the very particular tiredness of having been, all day long, everyone's easy person. And the loneliest part is that almost no one can see it. You have become so good at this that your effort has turned invisible. People simply experience you as easy, as low maintenance, as the one who never seems to need anything. They do not see the constant, quiet calculation running underneath. They do not know that your calm is a performance, that your flexibility is really vigilance, that the person who never appears to need anything is often the person who learned earliest of all that having needs was dangerous. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel unmet, because the version of you they are loving is the version you built to keep them comfortable. So here's what the science is actually saying to you, because it is not telling you that you are broken. It is telling you something far kinder than that. The fawn response is not proof that you are spineless. It is proof that you survived. It is evidence that at some point, you were in a situation where pleasing was the most loving and intelligent thing a person your size could do. And you did it, and it worked. And that is part of the reason you are still here today. Your kindness is not a weakness. It is a callus that grew over a wound. It formed because it was needed. It carried you. And because it was learned, it can be unlearned, not torn out, not forced. The answer to a fawn response is never to scold yourself for having one, because shame is simply one more large and frightening voice in the room, and your nervous system will only fawn harder to please it. The way through is slower and gentler than that. Porges' own work points to the path. Safety, he showed, is not a decision you make. It is a felt sense, something the body has to experience directly again and again before it will dare to believe it. So the work is not to argue yourself out of pleasing. The work is to give your body small, repeated proof that the world has actually changed, That a person can be disappointed in you and he will not be cast out into the cold. That you can say no and he will still be standing. That disappointing someone is not the same thing as being in danger, even though for a long time, in the only world you knew, they were the very same thing. It begins almost impossibly small. A single pause before the automatic yes. One honest answer where you would normally have softened it into a lie. The discovery, survived once and then survived again, that someone can be a little unhappy with you, and you are still safe, still loved, still here. Each time the body learns something new. Each time the old reflex loosens just slightly. You are not at war with yourself. You are teaching a frightened part of you that the year is no longer the year it first learned to be afraid. And here is something that may surprise you. You will not lose your kindness in this. People are often afraid that if they stop pleasing, they will turn cold or selfish or hard. It does not work that way. What you lose is not the kindness. What you lose is the fear underneath it. Genuine generosity and frightened appeasement can look identical from the outside, but they feel completely different from the inside. One is a gift that you choose to give. The other is a tax you pay to feel safe. When the fear finally goes quiet, your kindness does not vanish with it. For the first time in your life, it simply becomes yours. So go back one last time to that moment from the very beginning. Someone asks you for something. You feel the old yes rising before you have decided anything. You feel the apology forming for a crime you have not committed. You do not have to swallow that yes in shame anymore. You do not have to hate the part of you that offered it. Because now you finally know what it is. It is not weakness. It is a small, loyal sentry posted long ago at the door of a much younger you, still standing at attention all these years later, still trying to keep you safe in the only way it ever learned how. You can turn to it gently. You can thank it for how hard it has worked, for how well it once protected you, for how much of your survival it quietly carried on its small shoulders. And then you can tell it something it has been waiting a very long time to hear, that you are grown now, that the door it is still guarding opens onto a different world than the one it was built for, that it is allowed at last to put down its watch and rest. The yes was never the problem. The yes was a child still trying to keep you alive, and you, finally, get to be the one who turns to that child and tells it the truth, that it is safe now, that it is loved without having to earn it, that it can come home. If you made it all the way here, to the end of something this quiet, then you are already the kind of person this was made for. Not someone hunting for a quick trick, but someone willing to understand the deepest reasons they became who they are, and to be gentle with what they find. That willingness is rarer than you think. If you want more of these, the science underneath the feelings you have carried your whole life, told with patience instead of noise, then follow along, and the next one will find its way to you when it is ready. Stay close. There is still more of you to meet.